Hi, good evening, everyone from India, and it's an early good afternoon for Namita, who's joining us from Basel in Switzerland. So, Namita is a senior of mine from IIT Bombay, a friend, and a lot of accomplishments to her credit. I think among the many, I could list down the majors ones probably as going to Stanford from IIT, and then working with the National Knowledge Commission, which is a slightly unique set of experiences that most people from our background probably don't get. And then and then the most interesting part, which makes her perfectly right person to speak on today's topic, is the time that she spent with Omidyar, and that's where she was on the board of White Hat. So you might have questions around how that whole thing transpired and how that deal happened. And then she's been a board observer with Senta. She's been a board observer with Vedantu. So she's had a pretty close view of how the edtech space in India has really evolved over the last several years. And so instead of me trying to describe all of that, I'd probably welcome Namita on board. Thank you for joining us today, Namita. And it's over
Thank
to you, really, to just probably give us a bit of sense on your journey, from IIT or maybe a little before that.
no, thank you, Ankur, and I think you have already covered it. But I think just to put it again a little bit, my interest in education occurred with curiosity in terms of really asking myself this question: what problems I wanted to solve in life, and really understanding that how education and economy, at a household level and at a country level, are so interlinked, right? So when you are graduating from a college, uh, typically those idealistic questions, you are still like fresh with a lot of energy and want to solve the world's biggest problems, and that landed me onto education. So my first full-time stint was with National Knowledge Commission. It was again out of curiosity and learning. I didn't know I wanted to work with government or any government organization, but this was a set of people who. One second, my screen is just turned off. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you all right.
Okay. Uh, okay, I can't see you. Can you just give me a second? Hmm.
A screensaver, maybe?
Maybe we can keep it an audio conversation. It doesn't
I
matter.
can see you and we can hear you all right. So as long
That's
as you're okay
awesome. I think
talking to like
that,
a blank screen, we're all right.
that works perfectly well as long as you can hear me.
Okay.
So yeah, so I was saying my stint with National Knowledge Commission was my way to understand the education sector, with some of the best leaders from the country really spearheading that commission. And once I think I got enough intrigue to say, okay, I wanted to solve this problem, and then I got an opportunity to go to business school at Stanford, and that's where really technology happened to me. And Ankur, you would relate to it. I think IIT, at least in our decade, did not necessarily inspire us to become coders or technology people, but Silicon Valley does not leave you not think about technology upfront. So this was I really started thinking about what can technology do for education. I worked in a product role in a Bay Area startup. Then I came back with a full commitment that I wanted to continue working in education and explore how technology can work in education. For the next 10 years, I was not looking anywhere else. And my criteria was simple, that I wanted to work with the smartest people in the country. So ended up working with Ashish Dhawan, who at that point was leaving Chris Capital to start Ashoka University, and also a foundation. Given my interest in edtech, I joined the foundation and did a lot of work there. Really, that was really tinkering with the idea of edtech. A lot of it was non-profit, working with the non-profit organization, but the idea was, how do you use technology to scale quality? So I worked with several entrepreneurs, most of them incubated, and that's when I learned a lot from different stakeholders' points of views in terms of teachers, parents, students, and really understand what it takes to what it means to do at tech. Right? It's not just about scaling the quality, scaling the content. It's really about scaling the way you teach, and there is a subtle difference in that. I think a lot of the first 5 years of the last decade was about edtech was equivalent to e-content, but that I think is a fallacy. It's not e-content. It is really about scaling good teaching and learning. um, And again, if I'm unclear here, again, I'm happy to talk about it
Yes,
later.
that in fact is where I was going to head, except your video is exactly right now on a pause. So
Okay.
maybe your computer has been acting
This
up.
is what happens after you've done all the testing and everything.
But we can hear you all right nonetheless. So as long as the audience can too, we'll continue with the conversation. In the meanwhile, if you're able to fix this, great.
Yeah.
Or else we'll make do with the voice for now. So
Yeah. Yeah.
the natural next question would, of course, Namita, be that how would you describe the current landscape? Because there's so much action that's happening, and in some sense, you'll probably have a framework by now on how you'll define the key segments, their respective sizes, maturity, nature of competition. So, would love to have the lay of the land from your perspective, how you would put it.
Yeah, the landscape is quite large and varied. So if you really think about education, right? So in private sector itself, we spend $90 billion in cumulative, and this is only growing, right? And poised to grow to $170 billion in the next 3-4 years. Given the expansion that we're looking at, given the larger disposable income that parents now have to spend on education. As I said earlier, education is really the ticket to come out of not just poverty, but for any income strata to for upward and social and economic mobility. So education is very, very important, and government also spends about the 60-70 billion dollars, right? So the landscape is large. It's been a lot of it is brick and mortar. Edtech has been a small part of it, right? So I think in 2020, when we did a study when I was at Omidyar, it was really just $1.3 billion. Today, it has probably doubled, but this has potential to grow multifold. And even at that point, it will be just 10-15% of the entire education
So this you're
landscape.
saying is the annual spend on edtech companies. So the revenue for people like Byju's and White Hat combined. Is that the number, 1.3 billion?
That was in late 2019. So I
Sure, of
am saying
course.
it has doubled today, given all the pandemic acceleration and the growth in the industry. We had projected for 2025 edtech to become $10 billion, right? So even if it has doubled, there is a 4 to 5x growth
Of course.
still left. And I think that 10x, $10 billion number will cross sooner than later. Of course, if we
Sure,
have to keep doing the right things, we have to keep
of
doing the
course.
right things, right?
But would
So,
you be able to break this down a little bit for us?
yeah,
Because you have the test prep, you have the coding, and you
yeah,
have so many other different spaces getting
yeah.
identified now within edtech. Would love to
Yeah,
just deep dive a bit into this.
yeah, definitely. So, you think about starting from early years of learning, and test prep, of course, is the first one which got disrupted, quote unquote, right, with technology. But you start from early years, from 0 to 3 years of learning, where the child is even at home or in Anganwadi center in certain cases. The education is happening, learning is happening then. From there, of course, in the school education, where K to 5 is a lot about, just getting the child to learn by play, getting them the right foundation of learning, getting them to explore interest even beyond academics. And grade 6 to 8 is where a lot of deepening of concept happens. And ninth onwards is, of course, in our country, it's been a test prep race. So all across here, if you really think about, there are different languages, there are different state boards, there are different models of learning. So all of this present multitude of opportunities just in the K-12 segment, right? And I'm not even touched the post K-12 segment right now. And when you and B2C and both B2B have been a big force. B2C, of course, was the first one, and now the schools are embracing technology. School market is actually larger than the supplemental education market. School market is $25 billion versus $16 billion of the after school market. But technology was really not able to penetrate in a big way or in a growth fashion way until recently. And I think it's also a natural evolution of the industry that it is now happening. We have like examples of likes of lead school, really becoming large and catering to large number of schools. But just completing your question, besides K-12, there is college prep and then upskilling happening. So higher education is also a large market. of that $90 billion I mentioned, $50 billion is higher education. Actually, a lot of it has been in the private sector. We have seen what the quality of expansion of engineering and MBA schools have done in the decade of 2000. Really poor quality, and now, while the degree lelo was one of the important things that people wanted, but now it is all about jobs and livelihoods, right? And colleges which are not doing well are shutting down. Where will these students
Hmm.
go? They will go to the better mode of learning, better career. Whoever can facilitate a better career path for them, right? And a lot of that is up for grabs for Edtech. A lot of it will also be in partnership with colleges to help them expand, to help them improve quality. And then, of course, upskilling, right? Like, we all work in corporates, and how many of us say that, our talent requires a lot more training, right? Corporate learning has been a small market in India, but globally it is a large market. And now, my recent conversations with a lot of L&D managers in corporates have also revealed that, the budgets have finally started to expand in India
Hmm.
also, because, retaining talent has been hard, and, the technologies have been changing. So people need to upskill. And we've all seen news of, likes of your IT companies firing a lot of, or laying off a lot of mid managers earlier, right? Because if they're not upskilling themselves, and the technology is changing, then it's not relevant anymore. So I think the upskilling is very, very important. I think our big hypothesis is that last 10 years has been a lot about technology upskilling, and the next 10 years will also be a lot about leadership skills. And leadership, I don't mean just like the CXO level talent, right? Leadership
Hmm.
is at all levels. The leadership, emotional intelligence training, and there is ton of opportunity that will open up, in terms of what technology can do to provide and help people in their career growth. So the long answer to your question, but really, I think the profit pools are immense. The expansion is there to happen, and different models will emerge, right? Because there's no one model that can cater to the diversity of India. So it's definitely a big market with no winner takes it
What you
all.
seem to suggest, Namita, is there's pretty large bunch of white spaces available and growth available to nearly all the players potentially, if they, as long as they maintain their market share as well. Having said that, you see a certain amount of this high CAC edtech businesses because apparently most people seem to be chasing the same test prep audience or the same, let's say, K-12 audience. So is this the case of, let's say, too much attention to one particular segment while there are so many other segments that are available?
Yeah, yeah. And part of my worry has also been this, like, uh, but I also feel like there is also a lot of industries face this, and this is not just education.
Hmm.
But let me elaborate on both parts, right? So, uh, yeah, I mean, look at what pandemic did, right? Of course, there's a lot of online education and helping schools to cater to online education, but I have seen at least 40, 50 companies in the extracurricular space for children.
Mhm.
And a lot of this is very, very talented entrepreneurs. But, again, not to their fault, but it's all happening at the same time, right? So,
Sure.
yeah, so what will happen, right? Like, 50 companies will not make it big. 50 companies will not be able to differentiate themselves after a point in time.
Hmm.
So maybe the top three, four companies will ride the wave here, and the rest may fall through, right? So
Hmm.
yes, this is to say that, some segments tend to attract, lots of entrepreneurs at the same time. Um, and while kind of overlooking the other side, of possible opportunities that kind of exist as much. But I think this, hopefully this dialogue is helping people think about, just go beyond what's already being tried, and there are lots of things to take up. Uh, and maybe one more example, right? We saw this, when I was at Omidyar, the coding bootcamp space, right? It got success in US, and all of a sudden there were like 20 companies in the coding bootcamp ISA space also. So I'm giving this example to say that it's not necessarily the pandemic that has done that, right? But it happens in an industry, and I'm sure, like, others can relate to the similar thing in financial services industry or an e-commerce industry, right? Where similar kind of models are built. And the proof is right there, right? In the coding bootcamp space, right? Like there are 3 players or 4 players who are really kind of able to raise money and continue to do the right things and hopefully builds businesses. So that is going to happen, and CAC, of course, goes through the roof, right?
Which is what the question, given that on one side you're saying there's so many spaces available, then these people are again fighting the same game. So of course the CAC is going to go. So hence the title of this session, right? And that's what's excited so many of our attendees. What are the blue oceans in your opinion where you feel excited? Kia, why isn't somebody attempting this particular space or
Yeah,
a sub-segment of the space, right?
yeah. So I would say, higher education in my mind is a big one, right? Again, you think about it, as I said, $50 billion market. And if you looked at the national education policy that came out in 2020, the
Mm-hmm.
intent has been put, right? We, as a country, we moved to having 11% of people who should be in higher education. That was in 2010 number, to
Mm-hmm.
25% by 2020. But we want to take that number to 50%, right? So there
Okay.
is basically a massive call out for expansion. But if the expansion happens the same way it happened in the last decade, we will then be solving the unemployability problem, right?
So are you
So
saying that this is, yeah, please complete. Sorry.
yeah, so I'm saying the higher education to me is a big space where different models can happen. There's a lot of opportunity for technology players to partner or roll out programs directly to consumers. And I also think that India can also be a provider of higher education or these skills to at least the neighboring countries. Why can't India become the beacon of higher education for South Asia, for that matter, right? Like we have so much, we've churned out so much talent. That means something is working in our higher education system. Of course, a lot needs to lot needs to improve as
Sure.
well. But I do think there is a huge space there. Um, you had a question
So,
before.
for a moment to zoom into this one itself, right?
Yeah.
Because to set up a college in India, there were a bunch of requirements. And since you have exposure to the policy side, I'll just probably take a moment to make this more real. You needed some compliances, some UGC tie up or whatever, bunch of things to be done before you can actually set up a college. Are you suggesting that this is a time for virtual colleges to set up, which are entirely technology centered and digitally powered? They might have their live conversations, their live workshops, and live exams or whatever, but the core of it, it's all tech enabled and kind of virtual, right? So all you need to join this college and get this degree is perhaps a laptop and an internet connection. Is that a real possibility as of today from a
No, I don't think
regulatory
so. That
standpoint?
is the real possibility because you still need to be affiliated or
Yeah.
accredited to UGC and Higher Education Act, come under some Higher Education Act. I don't think that today that is possible, but the regulations are allowing for the existing universities to offer more and more online courses. Uh,
Okay.
and the degree will still be given by those approved by the government, right?
Hmm.
But there is a possibility for you to work in partnership
So
with
maybe you're
colleges.
saying that become a B2, B2C player. So maybe what an upgrad would be trying to do with, let's say, a Narsimonji offering a course which is partly on campus, partly online, a certification which is validated because of Narsimonji or somebody like that. And it's where upgrad kind of monetizes the content in an additional fashion. Is that what we would say?
Yeah, and upgrad is doing it for like 2 or 3 streams, and
Sure.
upgrad cannot
Yeah,
do
yeah.
it for all the colleges, right? So,
Yeah.
uh, so I think there is so that is one model, right? Then there is another model which is a Sunstone University model, right? Which works
Hmm.
very closely with the universities and helps them with their admissions, all the way from admissions to placements, right?
So
So,
if I were to,
so mhm.
hmm. Please
Yeah.
complete, please complete.
Yeah. And then there is another company, Superset, right, which basically was helping colleges solve for their placement issues, right? Like because placement
Mhm.
cells are broken, and except for the maybe the top colleges, placements are not really the sticking point. So started with a SaaS tech experiment, really working with the colleges, but now you have data of all the students who are going through that funnel, right? Could you then help them also? you know uh, bridge the gap in their employability skill level and learn while they are in college before they graduate, right? So what I'm saying is there is no one model necessarily,
Sure.
but the space of getting people before they graduate, right?
Hmm.
Catch them early in partnership with colleges or outside, right? And train them before they are ready for the real world. Otherwise, what's happening, Ankur, is uh, on an average, a graduate spends 2 to 3 years, right, figuring out their first job, right? You look around, forget, I'm not talking about the top,
Sure.
50 or 100 colleges, but that is true, right? So many people prepare for government jobs for 3 years, right, just to eventually land into a private job, right? So people
Hmm.
are, so I think even for students, from a student or a graduate perspective, it has been highly inefficient, our system, right? So if technology wants to really solve the problem, they have to solve the problem where I find this space really exciting because it is what employers need, it is what students need, it is what colleges need, right? So and you can create outcomes based model here, right? Like you can actually show that you are delivering outcomes if you do a good job. So um,
So I have a bunch of questions, but I don't want to pause your thought stream, so please complete.
yeah, but I don't want to give an impression that higher education is the only space that we are
No,
excited
that's
about.
okay. We have time to kind of delve into more. But since we spoke about higher education and employability as a subject, would you consider an OYO of finishing schools, which becomes, let's say, a part-time curriculum across a bunch of colleges, to be a possibility? What I've also heard a lot of times, and this is probably you might know Harpreet from, of course, IIT, and the whole impression that colleges were not willing to pay for some of these things because the guy on the other side is just happy collecting all the fees without delivering much tangible in return. Is that still holding true? Are students not more aware? And should that open up possibilities of having, let's say, a model where I affiliate myself with colleges? I have a certain curriculum structure that I follow. Maybe I go train the teachers as well. Maybe I standardize the testing and assessment practice. So at the end of every year, there's a standard assessment that actually happens, and that rates the students, that rates the school itself on their intervention and efforts, and potentially make them more employable in a more standardized fashion. Do you think that space is attempted meaningfully by somebody elsewhere internationally? It's available for somebody to start. What would it take to build something like this?
Yeah, I mean, just taking the second part first, right? I think there is no doubt in my mind that consumers are getting more and more aware, right? Like,
Hmm.
I mean, especially again, if not before the pandemic has again, made it visible to them what on like what some quality players are doing or not doing. We had already started reading news of colleges shutting down. I don't know
Sure.
if, right, because whatever expansion mushrooming we did, right, and after a point, if you're not delivering quality, you have to kind of wean out. Um, I mean, at some point, I used to think maybe the poor master's program, which has become like almost like a norm in our country, right? Like bachelor se kuch nahi hota, MBA to karna hi padega types, right?
Yeah.
At some point, you can visualize a world where that is completely taken over by a new stream of quality program that actually deliver
Hmm.
value, right? I don't see
Hmm.
undergrad going away, right? Undergrad will stay, it should stay because it is a lot of
Sure.
life skills and all of that
Yeah.
happen. So I think consumers are definitely getting more aware, and I'll give you some more examples, right?
Hmm.
What have students gone through, right? So you spend 4 lakhs a year in engineering colleges, right? That means you have spent about 16-20 lakhs in your engineering degree, right? This is private college, and then after that you don't land into a job. You are someone located in say somewhere in Chhattisgarh or wherever and now you move to Bangalore or Hyderabad to attend a brick and mortar training institute, which is supposedly teaching you software engineering skills to go and apply to a job, right? How are they teaching you software engineering skills today? Literally, you are copying from Blackboard and writing it on paper, right? That's not how you learn coding. So this is
Sure.
has been like the desperation level of our, and that word is wrong, completely wrong. I should not say that,
Sure.
but this is what our youth have been subjected to, and the parents have been subjected
Hmm.
to, right? And I'm saying, how is that not going to disrupt, especially as people are seeing that, you know, um, I I mean, you know about the income sharing agreement model that came about, right?
Yeah.
Like that basically started.
I had a question. Is that legit in India yet?
So there is no regulation framework around it, and
Okay.
mostly it works in terms of tying up with NBFCs
Hmm.
to facilitate the payments from
Facilitate
a
that.
working capital perspective. But really, what it is doing, that income sharing agreement is putting the trust into the system, right?
Hmm.
And removing the
Accountability as well somewhere.
yeah. And in fact, that is a great model to reduce CAC, right? I
Hmm.
saw almost 0 to 5% CAC in that model versus a 50% CAC model, right? Because you are able to essentially put outcomes first, right? If I don't give you
Yeah.
outcomes, you don't pay me, right? And in fact, a lot of my theory is that, of course, a product-led model and all of that, we can keep talking about, you know, optimize funnel and all of that to reduce your
Sure.
CAC. But ultimately, outcomes is the right way to build brand for the long term. That's what has happened in education and health, right? I mean,
Hmm.
your best of the colleges and the best of the hospitals are best and known, and people are pulled to them because they deliver outcomes, right?
Sure.
um, so I think that is a big question mark for the industry, the technology industry, edtech industry also. But I probably
Yeah. You use the word
probably
desperate,
already
right? So
understood.
well, I'm just curious, since you use the word desperate, that should somewhere say that the demand side, in terms of people looking for quality education as a path to upward mobility, there's no dearth of people who want to upgrade their careers and all of that, right? Now, having said that, when people like some of the online companies would be selling courses for 399 to, let's say, 39,999, whatever those numbers look like, at this point, all they're able to offer is a certification. And
Hmm,
since I'm also a recruiter across a bunch of places, so we try and kind of assess candidates when they're merit in the interview conversation. So is it yet time for some of these things to start reflecting in people's CVs and in their interview quality, that there's genuinely been an upgrade? Because I'm not yet as confident about
hmm,
the level of quality that is the delta, right? I mean, when I've
hmm,
gone through a bunch of certifications and whatever, the delta that I've got in terms of the quality of the candidates, I'm not yet personally very convinced. But is
hmm.
that how you see this as well, in terms of the level of intervention being made not being enough?
Yeah, yeah. So, you may have, as I gave you that example, that people
Hmm.
moving to Hyderabad and Bangalore, right? So
Yeah,
people are upskilling themselves, right? But
sure.
where are they upskilling themselves from, right? Are
No, I
you
mean,
really?
forget about the guy who's teaching coding on a blackboard. I'm talking about all these fancy online courses which are very aggressively marketed right now. I'm not going to name anybody because that's not
Mhm,
the point.
mm,
But let's say I bought a course for digital marketing for a certain amount of money with an online company, which is promising to, let's say, make me a XYZ certified digital marketer. But at the end of those 3 months, when I'm appearing for a conversation or an interview, am I actually genuinely that much more knowledgeable? Or
mm,
is it going to be really a combination of theoretical and practical and whatever, which then means a slightly more high intensity intervention, because that's where the delta would come from. So when we're
mm,
saying the superficial intervention with one certificate, we see a slightly more intimate play. Because you've seen the folks which are the coding specialty industry has had a lot more evolution in that sense, right? Because the pay hike that people seem to be getting after going through a 6 month program with, let's say, a scalar, probably a lambda, is
mm.
in that league where you genuinely see outcomes being very, very exciting and meaningful. Are we, is it fair to say that similar nature, and you use the word I say here, similar nature of interventions across nearly any stream, be it sales, be it marketing, be it product management, be it, and we saw growth school getting funded as well now, be it growth, genuine hands-on, high-touch intervention, which make that delta. Is that what we see a meaningful
Yeah, I
play
think
for
you've
good?
you've you've touched upon two important things, right? It is a high
Hmm.
touch intervention, right? So if you're only doing superficial, low touch intervention, I don't think our
Hmm.
candidate input is great enough to give them any big tick into
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
kind of showing the difference. Maybe I don't know who you're talking about. And again, if I knew who you were talking about, it's not fair for me to say, okay, I know the quality of
Sure.
programs. But really, I think a lot of it takes a lot of effort to upskill someone, right? It's not the
Exactly.
learning. Upskilling is not, it's not content play, right? It's like it's a
Yeah,
process of,
absolutely.
and and again, where are you starting from and what is your end point, right? So maybe there is a delta there, but is that
Yeah.
is the end point enough, right? So I think, in my mind, it's very, very clear, and upskilling is not a low touch effort, right? So if you are only
Hmm.
doing I don't know what a 399 rupees course does, right? I mean, maybe it just teaches you some definitions of digital marketing, or some SEO strategy or something like that. But in my mind, that's not enough, first of all. And second, I think that it's, today the trust was also built by affiliating with universities or corporates, and building courses like that. But ultimately, what happens to your students, right? Like tomorrow, you start saying no to hiring from such places, right? And lot of that becomes visible. There'll be pressure on the training providers to do the job better, right?
Hmm.
So otherwise, we are going to be in the same loop, right? We have been in the brick and mortar system as well, right? Like, it's
Exactly.
not like कि colleges nahi hai, right? Or
Hmm.
training, mom and pop training shops nahi hai, right? But really, that's why I'm saying the real question in front of edtech is outcomes, right? And unless, and that needs to be the evolution of this decade, in terms of really showing the outcomes for their students, and then working backwards to say, okay, what will create those outcomes, right? If it means high touch intervention, it has to be high touch intervention, right? So
Yeah, which is what then makes me wonder, since you said that there's so many geographic angles, so many vocations that people could go after, so many different kind of jobs that exist. So if you were to just zoom into one geography, one job profile, the market in terms of supply as well as demand can be still meaningfully large. So is this at all seen as a winner takes all kind of market? I mean, normally when you look at billion-dollar valuations, you'll start to wonder that this is the big guy in India. But you just mentioned he probably owns less than 1% or probably 0.5% share, even in the sub segment of education, let's say K-12. So I'm just wondering now that from an entrepreneurial standpoint, then people look at education, at least they used to, as a slightly noble career. You're imparting a positive impact on somebody's life, right? And I'm just now beginning to wonder if models which are high touch, which tend to be more involved from a founding team's perspective, some often less scalable compared to the very fast scaling model. E-content led models are extremely scalable, right? But the model which require a higher touch, and a very simple example that in my conversation appeared, a soft skills trainer needs to do a one-on-one interview with every candidate, let's say 10 times, before he can actually see some outcomes. Now, that same trainer could go to a corporate office and train 300 students and get paid much better for her time. So, in order to solve a problem like this, it's not going to be something that you can just plug and play that is recording, the kids can see and then they'll upgrade. It won't happen. Somebody has to take a
yeah,
mock interview, somebody has to give feedback. So, I'm just now beginning to wonder if an appropriate model for a lot of these high touch plays will
mm,
end up being about a focused effort on making that delta meaningful and see
mm,
where the model starts to break in terms of scalability. A lot of
mm.
models might not be scalable nationally or to multiple locations, but still good business because for the same specific micro segment, you have meaningful demand, meaningful supply available. Does that resonate
Yeah,
somewhat? What
and
do you think?
you're right, and maybe let me give you two examples from the offline or the outside India world to even elaborate further why this is not a winner takes it all market, right? Um, so Akash, which is the JE test prep or the medical exam test prep company, only located in the northern part of India, was a 1,500 to 2,000 crore business with 27% EBITDA, or something close to that, right? Like 2 years ago. So just look at the scale of that company, only operating into a certain segment and in a certain geography. And we have examples from our country, just the brick and mortar institutions where you can build big businesses without necessarily needing to be a national level scale, right? Of course, it is a big scale. Um, Similarly, TAL, right? And again, let's not talk about China Edtech, but TAL or New Oriental, right? These were the world's largest company, and for China, they were 1.5-2% of their overall market, right? 20, this is before pandemic, $20 billion market cap company, right? And
Wow.
yeah, so education certainly is not a winner takes it all market. I think attempting it to making it a winner takes it all market, you are definitely, I mean, you more power to those who can do that, but you can
Yeah, that's just being
compare
adventurous
your
slash ambitious.
opportunities. Uh-huh.
That's just being probably a little too ambitious. I don't know, not realistic.
Yeah,
I mean,
somewhere,
not being
somewhere.
realistic is not a problem, but I mean, that just means that. So to me, where I was trying to head with this is the venture capital led play versus the impact play. And I know you spend meaningful time at Omidyar. So I was going to ask you that when in terms of looking at pure venture capital led returns, people tend to want monopolized spaces. People tend to want that disproportionate return on investment. So that's where the dominant play slash winner takes all play becomes the default goal for the entrepreneurs. But on the other side, when you look at Omidyar kind of players, and there is more people trying to do impact investing, how do you look at the financial side of things vis-a-vis the impact side of things?
Yeah, yeah. I don't think the disproportionate returns you cannot make in a non-winner takes it all market either, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
that's where probably education. That's my point is that you can build large businesses, right? Uh, by focusing even on a smaller segment of population. But I think to your earlier point, and I'll come to the Umidyar part, is um, at some point this you have to really see how scale and quality will go hand in hand, right?
Hmm.
And by high touch intervention, I didn't necessarily mean that you cannot scale while doing high touch, right? That's where technology should come, right? There is a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
right? But can technology really help personalize learning? Can technology really create more discipline and focus for the learner? Can you so um I'm not talking about millions of, even 100,000 scale is a great scale in education, right? Like if you
Sure.
do high intervention work, of course there's a million student play also, right? So you, if you want to build businesses like that, I mean, I don't want to leave the impression that because it's a non-winner takes it all market, you cannot make disproportionate returns. I think you can, right? Like
Okay.
uh, and my and even at Omidyar, right? I think we have, and again, I'm not the spokesperson for Omidyar anymore,
Sure,
but
of course.
let me just share, my what it was like investing through Omidyar. So. We had a strategy, right? Our focus was very clear that we were looking at a segment of population who is now starting using services and products as mobile phone was becoming more available, internet was becoming more available, and this is also the aspirer segment, right? So and the idea for us was to invest in businesses which are either today or over time will be reaching that segment of population in a very
Hmm.
very meaningful way, right? And Vedantu and Doubtnut are examples of those businesses, right, which are catering to a
The
big part,
aspirer.
like, even if it is 30%, 40%, but this the ability to disrupt prices and start
Hmm.
reaching that population is an important one for us. So there we expected commercial returns, right? So
Hmm.
it's not like any it's like any other VC for that matter. Having
Sure.
said that, we also, because we had patient capital, so we could also invest in businesses which we know will take longer uh,
Hmm.
to to really disrupt, because it's an infrastructure play, meaning like you're building some kind of credentialing system for teachers, or things like those, and we could take some of those bets, which because of our patient capital
Hmm.
that we had,
Because
right?
of
And
the
then
patients.
we could underwrite a sub-commercial return, right, for that matter. And there was also a third leg, by the way, for Omidya, which is the non-profit grants, right? So we also did non-profit grants and
Sure.
worked with policymakers. So that was our impact thesis there. So
So
I
you,
don't.
you did all of it. You did the commercial return play, you did the impact play with the non-profit, and you did the sub-commercial return play as well. So whatever suits the nature. But in terms of the kind of, so as a potential founder, and my hunch is given the nature of the topic, a bunch of our audience probably is either in the journey or expecting to get into the journey of becoming an edtech founder, considering working with somebody who's already doing that. So I'm just wondering, in terms of assessing what can be approached as a real opportunity, which is decent size in terms of the market size, and not yet already crowded. Like, it's not. I mean, the overall space is not crowded, but you will see WebEngage as a company has what 45 odd edtech customers by now. So it's not a small space. I'm not sure how many of them will forever survive slash become unicorns or whatever. But is it possible to imagine what would your, let's say, picture at the end of 5 years from now in India, in terms of let's say who's winning what, or not names perhaps, but the spaces which are now have some sort of a leader which is captured and dominating that subsegment. So how many spaces exist? How many billions of dollars worth of revenues will be made by edtech? You mentioned a few stats there, and that pie would get split into I don't know how many people. So I'm just trying to understand how to assess opportunities and which ones to choose and how to chase them.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe just answering it differently. So the businesses which I think we are usually finding crowded already and probably not that interested are the live learning, especially grade 6 to 12 classes taking going up to test prep. There's still a lot of businesses being built in the government job test prep segment, I guess,
Hmm.
because of the pandemic hit and lots of offline was disrupted. So I think it's getting a little crowded there. Coding bootcamp, unless you're doing anything differentiated, it's also become quite crowded. But I think there are, and in each of these segments, by the way, I see 2 or 3 players each, right? So it's not like one
Hmm.
player,
Hmm. Hmm.
and obviously different sizes and all of that will happen, right? And we are also seeing consolidation happening. So some, people will
Sure.
consolidate and become,
Yeah,
not
well,
just.
that in fact seems like a great idea, right? Build something quickly, sell it out to in 2 years to a Baiju because he's pretty much shopping for everything he can lay hands on.
I think it's a good back of the envelope, maybe third strategy that you should have, but cannot be a first or second
Hmm.
strategy.
Fair.
at least,
I think that's
at least
something
I
that
would
everybody
not
should
like that as
remember.
an investor, looking at, a potential just an exit. Of course,
Hmm.
and why not? If the businesses are becoming large, if we are willing to sell to offline players, right? The technology players also, we could, look at acquisition plays, but
Sure.
that cannot be my starting point for, building
Hmm.
businesses necessarily. um so I do think there is still, like, things to see in the early learning, 0 to 8-9 years old. And I think early learning is also very interesting to me because it will be at the intersection of education and health, like 0 to 4
Hmm.
5 years, right? Like how do you teach skills but also make sure that the child is healthy, and there's socio emotional learning happening. So it's a lot more complex, and it's not the same play. It's not the pure play education play. So I do think there will be new businesses built, and hopefully one or two winners there. um, and then we already spoke about higher education, the upskilling space, where I mean, look at US, right? There is a Coursera, there is a Udemy, there is Udacity. Coursera was $7 billion. I think its stock market price has gone down a little bit, and Udemy is also a multi-billion-dollar business. So definitely, again, not a winner takes it all market, even in one
Sure.
space, right there. And if we can do something similar in the upskilling space on the leadership skill side that I was mentioning earlier, right? There could be 1 or 2 players, and why we could do India for global plays also. In fact, sometimes
Hmm.
I feel India is, probably has the opportunity to replicate in edtech what we did in IT and pharma. Uh,
Hmm.
the, become the global service. I mean, of course, pharma is generic products, but IT.
Sure.
Uh, so there is a lot of opportunity. So, and I think once you start looking at global, I think we'll have opportunities for multiple players here. But
So
but find your fit, right? And yeah.
So I would have one question before I would probably invite you to speak about Enzia. So you mentioned EdTech is going to be high touch. Tell me, and beyond e-content, right? So give me a few examples among all the things that you've seen happen of the non-e-content interventions. So live learning, of course, is a part of it. But beyond that, what are the so-called new age interventions? I wouldn't necessarily even call them EdTech in the strictest terms of making it mobile first or whatever. But give me a few examples, possibly, of such interventions which you see are tech enabled but not, let's say, tech centric.
Uh, and actually, I don't. So tech enabled. First of all, I
Matlab,
don't
assessments is
like I
all
don't
there.
like businesses necessarily which do not have a learning component. By the way,
Sure,
so learning is integral,
of course.
um, but there are, as I said, like, there's a placement tech, right, that was
Hmm.
built, right, that example of superset company that I gave, right, and
Hmm.
now work, working backwards to integrate learning, right, whether as a
No,
marketplace
so
or
zoom into that part. When you talk about learning, we're saying that okay, people will go through a certain amount of online content. They will probably go through some amount of live content as well. And then next, probably they will go through a bunch of assessments. So after which they'll have a certain grading. And basis this grading, somebody comes in. Now, this is to me a pure straight vanilla edtech implementation play. I was trying to imagine if the high touch intervention that we spoke about, if we have examples of somebody doing that meaningfully, maybe innovating on that side, which makes the delta superior, right? So that's where I'm yet to find, at least in my reference points, not enough good examples of the delta being better because of higher intervention. And what kind of interventions would these be like?
Yeah, so the high touch interventions we have seen in the coding bootcamp space, right? Masai School is the
Hmm.
company I invested in through Omidyar, right? So there it will be a 6 7 month program, daily
Sure.
program, right? And the technology intervention is, of course, there's a couple of hours of teaching or problem solving, but you are really just practicing a
Hmm.
lot. So that is an example of high touch play, right? Where it is not just about consuming content on the site, but really kind of running an
So you're
online
saying
learning.
the assessments there were more like AI driven, so whatever piece of code you write, you'll get instant feedback on it or something like that. So that was the so-called
That
high
too,
touch
but you basically are doing a lots of assessments and
self.
assignments, right? So
Yep.
you're
Hmm.
and there is someone to help you kind of navigate when
Hmm.
you're kind
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
stuck. So I think that is kind of falling into the space that you are talking about, the
So,
high touch.
that's where the high touch versus scalability are not necessarily in conflict, is what I hear you say in some sense. There is room to
But
do
you can
high
still
touch
build
but
a
scalable.
good size business, because if you are, see, as I was saying, that the student is, or the job seeker is already spending a lot of money. You're
Hmm.
just making that money spend efficient, right? So you can still
Yeah.
charge in, I say, 2 to 3 lakh rupees, right? And if you
Hmm.
build a
Hmm.
business where you are graduating even 20,000 people, you build a 500 crore,
Oh,
600,
absolutely.
right? So it is not, so when we, so this is a high touch intervention where you are not necessarily um, scaling to millions, but you are showing that delta in that 20,000 people's life annually, right?
Which is good enough. It's a perfectly healthy business.
Yeah, yeah, and good margin business, right? So, and again, I think while we focus so much on high touch, the I'm not what I think the high touch needs to, whatever that high touch is, right? It's not about just spending 6 7 months and showing that delta, but it needs to lead to outcomes. Whatever your model is,
That's
it needs
right.
to start showing outcomes, right? And it's not to say that all businesses should start replicating a coding bootcamp,
Of course.
model, right? So, but you have to start showing delta in the learning outcomes of your students.
Awesome. So, well, I think it's time for me to ask you about Enzia. What are you doing there? What are some of your, let's say, thesis? What are some of the companies you've seen? What are your favorite picks from there? Whatever you can share already.
Yeah, yeah. No, thanks for asking about Enzia. So Enzia, it's an early stage fund focused on three large and fundamental areas: healthcare, education, and environment. And we've chosen these three areas because today you've heard me talk about education, but we have similar passion for healthcare and environment, because we think these spaces are super large and are just ready to be disrupted and
And there's an impact angle as well.
and
Just a touch, maybe. Well,
and
you
there
still
is an
want commercial
outcome.
returns.
I like to use the word outcomes. There is an outcomes angle
Okay.
as well.
Hmm.
And the other reason we started Ankur, the other
Of course.
partners also, right? Because we are three people who bring deep sector experiences here, right? And our idea is to play to our potential and help identify the right businesses early on, and also help entrepreneurs in a meaningful manner, and not just be just another journalist VC,
The
right?
value added VCs. It's thrown
That
around a lot more often, but I've not seen a better combination of operators slash people who've done hands-on stuff in that industry before they became investors. Awesome.
yeah,
So, what's
yeah.
your favorite? I mean, if there's any public investment that you'd like to talk about from Enzia that you've made, which one would that be?
Oh, all of them. How
Oh,
can
I'm
you?
focused on EdTech and focus on the context of our today's conversation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we made two investments public. One is still in the documentation phase, so I'll stay away from talking about them.
Yeah.
Our first investment in EdTech is Curious Junior. So this is teaching coding skills to children on mobile phones. So I mean, with the success of White Hat Junior, there was a lot of replication and copycat models. and we recognize that now policies is making coding or computational thinking as part of curriculum. And if you want to reach children in India, it has to be delivered on mobile phones because laptop is
Hmm.
not accessible and
That's
it's
very
not
true.
there.
Hmm.
So these entrepreneurs, self-taught coders, ran a professional community of 2 million Android developers. They came together to really start building this out, and today they have built out a full curriculum around coding and making it really outcomes driven in terms of different of learning journey and different milestones that the students can achieve, but and making it all possible on a mobile phone, right? So there's a tech
Sure.
IT product play here. So quite excited about them. The
Outcomes
second,
remain the key buzzword here, of course.
yes, you maybe I've overused it, but probably
No, it's
give
a
you a
perfectly
sense.
legit thing to say. I mean,
This is
you're
what
talking about edtech. They better deliver outcomes.
yeah. And the second company we've invested in, it's a little unconventional edtech play. This is Leap.club, a professional community for women.
Hmm.
The thesis for me was very simple, Ankur. I see somewhere jobs, skilling and networks, becoming an integral part of how people learn, upskill, and move in their career trajectory. LinkedIn, to a certain extent, had showed us that, but it's become super horizontal platform, so it is
Hmm.
not going in depth. So the thesis was it will get disrupted. Natural extension will be more demographic focused networks,
Hmm.
and that led us to an investment in Leap.club, which is building the same thing, just focused deeply into just women as a segment. So very excited about them. It's a membership-based model, 3,000 members already, very high retention, very engaged community, and we have a lot of product features on the roadmap which will enable them on their skilling and career journey. So very, very excited about them as well.
Awesome. So, while I could possibly go on and on, I'm going to have to take this offline, but we have a bunch of audience questions that I thought we'll give them an opportunity. So, I see Shruti Gupta having a bunch of questions. Shruti, do you want to join us on the screen and ask this? Or maybe we'll read through your stuff. EdTech going vertical on areas that haven't been seen previous capital investment calls for a mention. Do you have anything specific in mind, Shruti, that you've seen happen? You can read as well, Namita.
Yeah. No, I think all valid points, Shruti. I think we are also a big fan of vertical focused approaches, right? Which goes deep again to Ankur's favorite buzzword from today's conversation. And uh, yeah, okay. So her question is: there is no centralized benchmark system to assess candidates who pass out. So even though you would like to think there is no delta, but the industry is undergoing quick change adoption and the system tools are being built. Yeah, no, I think this is a great call out, Shruti, because we can keep talking about outcomes, but how do you measure outcomes,
How do
right?
you measure? Absolutely.
Yeah, and in the jobs world, chalo, it is still easier, right? Because तुम्हें job लगा नहीं लगा, कितने का income, how much did your
Hmm.
income, right? How much income raise did you get, and all of that. But in K-12, it is really hard, right? So how do you even measure outcomes? So I'm glad to hear that there are ecosystem efforts being done. I know there was an IIT Bombay CSF collaboration on EdTech Tulna, which helps to evaluate product. So I think a lot of ecosystem collaboration will be required to create tools which make it easy to measure outcomes, right? Otherwise, measurement of outcomes itself can take a lot of effort and it's not trivial, right? So uski wajah se bhi, people just kind of stay away from it. But
The more verticals there are, the more measurements would be needed, right? Because the
yeah,
data would be different for different interventions, and the need for that would also be very different. So
yeah.
complex problem, but sure, worth attempting is how I would say it. So that you might want to put more questions up. We have a few minutes.
We wish so. I would love it. One of my favorite things across K-12 and otherwise is that academic marks is not enough, right? We all know that.
Hmm.
And we've all recognized the idea of learning skills like problem solving, critical thinking, or even just better emotional intelligence, right? Starting from early years. And today, again, linked to the previous question, there is no standard marker for measurement there, right?
Hmm.
And unfortunately, in a system like India, where we are such a tiered system, ki even for getting into engineering colleges we have to take an exam, right? So uh, without in the absence of the standardized tools for measuring other things which go beyond math and science or academics today, uh, it will be hard to kind of move away from the system. But I am glad this question is being raised, and hopefully we'll get there at some point. We'll get there at some point.
So I think
Yeah.
just to one little point here, the whole IB curriculum and education system is supposedly attempting this, right? But the penetration is still super tiny. The fees are still super
Mhm.
high. I would
Mhm.
imagine there'd be a bridge that will get built between what a current IB fees looks like and what a current CBC fees looks like. And thanks to technology interventions possible again, that
Mm.
there'd be the spectrum that will get created, which would make it more, let's say, a transition instead of an overnight shift. That's how I would imagine.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. And I think, the good thing is the likes of CBSC and NCRT are very open for collaboration, right? So there's a lot of
They are.
conversation happening. I think someone needs to kind of bridge the gap between policymakers and the startup world also to
And you
kind
can
of.
say that because of your knowledge commission experience, I would imagine.
Yeah, yeah, and I've done policy work in Central Square and in Omidyar, right?
Hmm.
So, so I
So
have
that's
got.
one more value add for the startups who might want to apply to Enzia, that the policy angle and the availability of those people to advise slash help slash collaborate is not necessarily very common knowledge.
Yeah. No,
Awesome.
I totally, I've gotten to appreciate how the policy world work, and I see a lot of policymakers open to, inputs from the for-profit world. I think we need to figure out a way to, bridge the gap, and hopefully we can play some role in due time. That is also one of our
Sure.
aspirations. So let's see. Let's see.
Awesome. What's next to that? Anything else? Ah, that's the elephant in the room, right? The CAC and the hard selling and the capital, I think the loan play. So yeah, I mean, I had that question in my mind, but I wasn't sure you wanted to take somebody head on. But if you are up to it, please.
Yeah, see, again, there is an external story, there is a media story, there's an internal story, right? So again, it is it is not fair for me to comment, from outside talking about one person. But I do think the way sales happen requires a lot of overhaul, right? Like, the sales incentive process needs to really be done better. And unfortunately, even with the best of the intentions of the entrepreneurs, there is mis-selling, there is fraud happening on the ground, right? So I think maybe my appeal to the edtech companies is come together, figure out a way to kind of solve for this issue. Do
But does
something
that
to
stem from
self-regulate yourself
But does that
there.
somewhere stem from the growth imperative? I don't know. I mean, so on one side, of course, you can to single out edtech might not be fair because you'll see similar very aggressive sales tactics across a bunch of industries. Banks are
Yeah.
relationship managers are notorious for pushing loans and insurance and this and that down people's throats. So no, not fair to single out edtech, but somehow the growth imperative might just be making this worse. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's both, right? It's a growth imperative, but it's also the bad culture that has been set. That's why I'm saying, with even with the
Hmm.
best of the intentions of the entrepreneurs, right? There will always be cases, and that's why I'm saying maybe the industry need to come together. The tech industry need to come together to one, to self-regulate, but also to figure out solutions here, right? If A player, the B player should not say it, but the A player does it, right? It's okay
But that's
for
the
me
truth
to.
of all industries, right? I mean, the Flipkart could
Yeah,
always blame the Amazon for running that discount, but they do the same thing, and ultimately it's a race to the bottom.
yeah,
And
yeah.
eventually, at some point, they'll make peace.
Yeah, and I'm glad you called out. It's not fair to single out edtech, but there is
Yeah,
definitely work needed on this front. So no
of
doubt
course.
about it.
Which is, I mean, it's a matter of what last 3 years that EdTech has come to this point, and obviously somebody has gotten lucky to have ridden that wave that way. But anyhow, yes, we're about to end our session. Any last questions to that? Sync with NEP. Is that an incomplete question, Kamal?
It's national education
Okay,
policy.
sorry. Oh, my bad.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. No, so we are an investor, right? So we look at the national education policy as almost like a preamble to what will happen in the industry over the next 10 years, right? So we look at the policy to almost identify trends. Otherwise, it's may or may not, right? Always kind of be. Matlab it's almost at a high level we will look at it for finding some synergies there.
Awesome. So, well, Namita, any closing remarks? I'm sure I have a lot of questions still to answer, and maybe it'll be more specific in a subsequent, maybe offline conversation. And maybe if there is an audience, we'll try and record that as well. But thank you so much from our side. Any closing remarks?
Thank you for having me, and it also definitely feels like an incomplete conversation to me
Yes.
because, but it was still it's fun because it was we went deeper into some aspects which are important, and you know I'm, I wonder if I left any confusion on the table, but
No, I
but
think you left a lot
you
of
trigger some
opportunity ideas
thoughts.
on the table. And what I'd love to be able to do is, drill a little deeper on some of those ideas and opportunities, given that there's at least a few hundred edtech startups now, and there's still probably a few more hundred spaces available, which are all multi-million dollar profitable, sensibly built businesses. And
Mm,
at WebEngage, that's what we talk a lot about, that, there's a lot of opportunities to build perfectly sensible businesses. As long as you focus on your key metrics being around, not acquiring is enough, you have to deal with retention as well.
mm.
So I would have loved to spend more time on those subjects, but maybe that's just for another day. Thank you so much, Namita. Thank you so much,
Thank
everyone, for
you.
attending and listening.
Thank you
Have
for
a nice
dealing
evening
with
ahead.
it. Bye.
Bye
Take care.
bye.